The most dangerous people you will ever meet are not the ones who lie to your face. They are the ones who let you lie to yourself about them. They say almost nothing false. They just let your hope fill in the rest. Most people think cleverness means being quick, fast comebacks, a sharp tongue in an argument, the ability to talk your way out of a room you should never have walked into. That is the common definition, and it is almost completely wrong. The people who talk the most during a negotiation are usually the ones who lose it. The people who explain themselves fastest after doing something wrong are usually hiding something. Speed is not intelligence. It is often panic wearing a confident voice. Niccolo Machiavelli had a simpler way of separating people, and it had nothing to do with how fast they talked. He wrote that there are actually three kinds of mind. One understands things on its own. The second understands things only once someone else has already worked them out. The third understands nothing on its own or with help. Most men spend their whole lives assuming they belong to the first category, when the honest, useful goal is simply making sure you're not the third. I learned this the expensive way, not the philosophical way. Years ago, I lent money to someone who thanked me every day for a week straight and then went quiet the moment repayment came up. Quiet for months. Quiet until it stopped being awkward for him and started being permanent for me. I didn't lose the money because I was stupid. I lost it because I let the gratitude do the thinking my judgment should have been doing. That gap is the whole subject. Words cost nothing. A man can promise you loyalty on a Tuesday and betray you by Friday, and the promise itself never gets tired, never runs out of energy, never has to prove anything. Behavior is expensive. It requires consistency in situations where nobody is watching and nothing is at stake. That is why Machiavelli built his entire understanding of power around one observation. Judge people by what they do when honesty actually costs them something. This is not cynicism. It is closer to physics. If appearances are cheap to produce and expensive to verify, appearances will always outnumber the truth, which means the burden falls on you to slow down and check. Consider Pope Alexander VI. Machiavelli watched him operate for years and came to a strange conclusion. The man broke nearly every promise he ever made, and it never once cost him. He would swear an oath with total conviction, mean it for exactly as long as it served him, and abandon it the second circumstances changed. People kept trusting him anyway, not because they were foolish, but because a confident enough delivery resets the account every single time. Each new promise arrived clean, as if the last broken one had never happened. He understood something most operators never bother to learn, that people forgive a broken promise faster than they abandon the comfort of believing someone. That is not a story about a corrupt pope in 15th century Italy. That is a story about how a pattern gets erased and reissued every time someone sounds sincere enough. And most people never count how many times they've already fallen for the same delivery. Chris found this out at 26, the slow way. She told him constantly that he was the most important person in her life, texted him good morning, planned their future out loud in specific detail. The apartment, the dog, the wedding, neither of them had actually discussed with anyone else. But when his father went into the hospital, she had a work thing. When he needed someone at 2 in the morning, she was asleep and apologized the next day without really explaining why her phone had been on silent. He kept the relationship together for another year, on the strength of what she said to him, not on the strength of what she actually did for him. When it finally ended, the thing that broke him wasn't the breakup. It was realizing he'd had the evidence the entire time and had simply refused to add it up. Notice the pattern. It never happened in the good years. It happened the moment sacrifice was required. That is always the test, and it is the only one that matters. Chris had noticed small things before the hospital call. A canceled plan here, a vague answer there. He let it go every time, because questioning it meant admitting he might have misjudged someone he'd already told his friends and family he was going to marry. That admission felt heavier than the doubt itself, so he set the doubt aside instead. People rarely get deceived because they lack information. They get deceived because they already had the information and chose comfort over it, since comfort doesn't require you to be wrong about anyone. I used to measure people by how they treated me. It took longer than I would like to admit to realize that was the wrong measurement entirely. The version of someone who is kind to you is often just a version built for your benefit. The real information sits in how they treat someone who can't do anything for them. A waiter, a stranger who cut them off in traffic, someone junior at work with no influence over their future. That is the version with nothing to gain from the performance. Machiavelli made the same point about leadership itself, and it applies just as well to ordinary life. He wrote that there is such a gap between how people actually live and how they ought to live that anyone who insists on dealing only with the second version will be constantly blindsided by the first. Most men build their expectations out of how people should behave and then feel personally betrayed every time reality doesn't cooperate. The clever ones stopped being surprised a long time ago because they stopped expecting the fantasy version to show up in the first place. Septimius Severus understood that same gap completely. When two rivals both threatened his claim to power, he could not fight both at once, so he wrote to one of them, a commander named Albinus, offering to share the throne as co-emperor. Albinus believed him completely, stood down, and waited. Severus destroyed his other rival first, marched west, and had Albinus killed the moment he no longer needed the alliance. Albinus never once caught a lie, because there was no lie to catch. Severus kept every word of his promise, right up until the day it stopped serving him. That is the part people miss about manipulation. It rarely requires dishonesty. It only requires timing. So what do you actually do with this? You stop treating a person's stated intentions as evidence and start treating their repeated behavior as the only evidence that counts. For the next 30 days, before you extend real trust, the kind that costs you something if it's misplaced, watch how the person behaves in a situation where being honest with you would be inconvenient for them. Not uncomfortable, inconvenient. A canceled plan, a shared mistake, a moment where taking the blame would be easy to avoid. Character shows up exactly there and nowhere else. There's a second layer to this almost nobody reaches because they get so good at reading others that they stop reading themselves. Machiavelli warned rulers about flatterers for a reason. Courts were full of men whose entire skill was agreeing with whatever the ruler already believed. The danger was never the flattery itself. It was how comfortable it felt to receive. The same trap catches anyone today who only keeps people around who confirm what they already think. You can spend years getting excellent at spotting deception in others while staying completely blind to the version of yourself that only wants to hear good news. Tony Soprano spent half his life reading everyone around him for the smallest shift in tone, who flinched, who over-explained, who agreed too fast, and it still nearly killed him because he never once turned that same read on himself. Desai, from Bungo Stray Dogs, survives every scheme built against him for the opposite reason. He assumes a kind gesture might be carrying a second purpose, checks before he reacts, and never assumes his own motives are automatically clean either. That instinct isn't paranoia when it's calibrated correctly. It's just refusing to let comfort make your decisions for you, including comfort about yourself. There's a simple practice that builds this. Once a week, pick one compliment or piece of praise you received and ask yourself honestly whether you'd have believed it from a stranger with nothing to gain. If the answer is no, you weren't flattered because the praise was accurate. You were flattered because you wanted it to be. That single habit, repeated for a month, will do more for your judgment than any amount of reading about human nature, because it turns the same scrutiny you use on other people back on yourself. Before we go further, think about someone in your life right now whose words and actions have never quite matched. There's already a name forming in your head. Say it in the comments, even just the situation, not the name. Naming a pattern out loud is usually the first thing that breaks its hold on you. The deeper cost of ignoring all this is not one dramatic betrayal. It's years. Years spent defending people because of how convincingly they explained themselves instead of how consistently they behaved. Years spent mistaking charm for character because charm is loud and character is quiet, and quiet things get overlooked when you're not paying attention. Every year you spend judging people by their best sentence instead of their average Tuesday is a year you hand control of your life to whoever happens to be the better talker in the room. Tonight, before anything else, write down the name of one person whose actions you've been excusing because their words are convincing. Just the name and the one thing they keep doing that doesn't match what they say. That's the immediate step. For the next 30 days, whenever someone asks for your trust, make them earn it in the small, inconvenient moments before you hand it over in the large ones. Not the dramatic tests, the boring ones. Whether they show up when showing up gains them nothing. Here is the rule worth keeping. When someone's words and someone's actions disagree, believe the actions every time without needing to understand why the disagreement exists. You do not owe anyone the effort of reconciling their own contradiction for them. That is their job, not yours. Machiavelli never asked his readers to become cruel. He asked them to stop being surprised. Surprise is what happens to people who never checked. The clever man is not the one who tricks everyone around him. He is the one who can no longer be tricked because he stopped listening to what people say they will do and started only counting what they have already done. Some of this only goes so far on a platform like this. There are parts of what I actually think about people and what I've watched them do to each other that don't survive here. That version lives on Patreon for the ones who want the whole picture instead of the edited one. That's the whole art, not outsmarting people, just refusing to be the last one in the room to see what was obvious the entire time. Thank you for watching. If you want to see more videos, make sure you hit like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.